My name is Kojo, and this happened when I moved back to Cape Coast after my father passed away. He left me the house he built years ago, the one everyone in the family feared. As a child, that place always made me uneasy. It stood alone near the forest, far from neighbors, surrounded by silence. People said my father had used the old ways to protect it. I never believed them until I moved in. The first day, everything felt wrong. The air was cold inside, even with the heat outside. The windows creaked, and the floors seemed to sigh when I walked. I brought in workers to renovate it, but by afternoon, they refused to stay. One of them told me, "Boss, someone's walking upstairs. We hear footsteps, but when we go, there's no one." I laughed it off, thinking it was rats or old wood shifting. That night, I heard it too. Heavy steps, slow, deliberate, pacing above me. I grabbed a flashlight and went up. The hallway was empty, but one door was slightly open. My father's old study, locked since his death. When I entered, the air was thick, dusty, but cold, like rainwater. Inside an old chest, I found dozens of photographs. People I didn't recognize. Some had their eyes scratched out. Others were burned. At the bottom was a small clay pot, sealed with black wax, carved with strange symbols. When I picked it up, I heard whispering, faint, like breath against my ear. I dropped it immediately. That night, I dreamed of my father, sitting in that same room, holding the pot. He said, "Don't move what you don't understand." When I woke up, I was still sitting on the floor, the pot beside me. I hadn't gone to bed. The next day, I told a village priest. He said my father once performed rituals to protect the family, but never completed them. The spirits, he called, were still waiting. He warned me, when the dead are comfortable, the living must not rearrange their chairs. I left that day, locked every door, and never went back. Now, 5 years later, the house still stands, silent, untouched. But people passing by say they sometimes see a light in the upstairs window or smell candle smoke from the forest. I tell them it's impossible. There's no one inside. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind is still, I hear those slow, familiar footsteps again, walking above me, reminding me that my father's house was never truly mine. My name is Ngozi, and last year I moved to Lagos for a new job. Finding a place to live was almost impossible. Everything was either too expensive or too dangerous. So when I found a small but neat one-bedroom apartment for half the usual price, I thought my prayers had been answered. The landlord, an older man with tired eyes, warned me. "It's a quiet building. Don't make too much noise at night." I laughed, signed the papers, and moved in the same weekend. For the first few days, it felt perfect. I decorated, cooked in peace, and loved the silence. But after a week, strange things started happening. The first time I woke up at 3 a.m. to hear the bathroom tap running. When I got up to close it, the water stopped by itself. I brushed it off. Maybe the pipes were old. Then came the smell. Every morning, the air was thick with incense, even though I never burned any. Sometimes I'd hear light footsteps in the corridor, like a child walking barefoot. But when I checked, the hall was empty. One evening, I found a tiny pink child's shoe under my bed. Dusty, worn out. I threw it away immediately. The next morning, it was back. Same spot. Clean, this time. I told my neighbor, a quiet man who'd lived there for years. When I mentioned my apartment number, his face changed. Flat 3B? The last woman there had a little girl. They both disappeared 2 years ago. I decided it was time for me to get out quickly from this apartment. The next morning, I packed everything and left. The landlord didn't even ask why. He just said quietly, "You lasted longer than most." A month later, I passed by the building on my way to work. The door to my old flat was open. A woman was moving in, smiling, excited. When our eyes met, I tried to warn her, but something about the landlord's look stopped me. He was standing behind her, smiling the same way he smiled at me the day I moved in. From now on, whenever I'm looking for a new apartment, I make sure to ask just one question. How much time did the last tenant spend there? And why was he in a hurry to leave? My name is Grace, and this happened 2 years ago, when my husband David and I decided to leave Nairobi for a quieter life. We'd been married 5 years, and the city was wearing us down. Noise, traffic, work stress. So when we found an old colonial house for sale near Nakuru, white walls and wide verandas overlooking the valley, it felt like a new beginning. The owner was an old man who barely spoke. He sold it cheap and handed us a single brass key. Before we left, he said only one thing: houses like this remember their owners. The first week was perfect. The mornings were peaceful. The air smelled like rain and dust. But at night, the house felt heavy. I would wake up to faint footsteps above us, slow, dragging, like someone pacing in the attic. David said it was rats, but every night, the sound came at the same time, at 11:47. A few days later, David changed. He started walking around at night, touching the walls like he was listening to them. He said he was getting to know the house. He stopped laughing, stopped answering messages from friends. One afternoon, he showed me a dusty painting we found in the hallway. A man and woman standing proudly in front of the same house. He said, "They must have loved this place. Look at the way they are standing." Then he stared at it for a long time, smiling quietly. After that day, he began calling me Eleanor. At first I laughed. Then it became a habit. When I told him my name wasn't Eleanor, he said, "It suits you better." Soon the whole house started to feel wrong. The clocks stopped working. Every single one. Froze at 11:47. Some mornings I'd find David already awake, sitting at the piano in the living room, pressing random keys, even though he never played. When I asked what he was doing, he said, trying to remember the melody. I told him we needed to leave. He just smiled and said, why would we leave? We belong here now. The next morning, I found a note on the table. It was in my handwriting, but I never wrote it. It said, he promised we'd be together forever. That night, I packed my bag. When I went to get the car keys, they were gone. David wasn't in the bedroom. I searched every room, every hallway, calling his name. Nothing. By sunrise, the house was silent. His clothes were still in the closet, his phone still charging by the bed, but he was gone. The police searched the nearby hills for weeks. They found his car parked near the lake. No sign of him. I left that same day and never went back. It's been 5 years since that night, and I never saw David again. As a woman of faith, when people ask me about that house, I simply tell them this: it didn't need ghosts to be haunted. It only needed someone to remember.